their representatives. This morning, our panel of elected officials includes Senator Zach Walz, a Democrat from District 37, Senator Tom Green, a Republican from District 44, Republican Dave Kerr, representative of House District 88, and Representative Gary Carlson, a Republican from House District 91. We have timers here from Muscatine Community College, and during the question and answer time, they will be timing for us. Each topic will be limited to 2 questions unless time permits. For additional questions at the end of the session, we'll ask each person asking a question to limit the time to ask the question to 1 minute, and then the legislators will limit their time of their answers to 2 minutes. The timers will give you a 15-second hand wave so that you know that your time is running short. So we'll begin. Welcome to all of you, and if we could start with introductions. Gary, would you like to start?
Sure. I'm Gary Carlson from Muscatine, and this week was the conclusion of the second funnel. So you'll see a lot of newspaper articles about that, and oftentimes there's articles about bills that are alive still or bills that are dead. But what you find when you serve in the legislature, don't take all of that to heart because there are many ways that bills can resurface. And there are some bills that are exempt from that. So if it's a Ways and Means bill regarding taxation or fees or that, it's exempt from the funnel system. It's an appropriation bill, so having to do with budgets and the amount of dollars allocated places. They are exempt from that. There can be leadership bills that are exempt, and a bill that did not pass could come up, could resurface as an amendment on some other bill later in the session. Now, many of them that are classified as alive are clearly that, they're alive. And it's more the ones that are classified as dead, which is a bit of a gruesome term to use, but the ones that are classified as dead are the ones that there can be a resurrection of some of those. But the goal of the second funnel is really to end the policy bills or the major policy bills, or the policy bills have had to advance far enough that they're still for debate in the House or the Senate. And those that did not move forward, and after the second funnel, they would have had to pass one of the chambers and a committee in the other chamber. So it's a bill that would have had to been debated on the Senate floor, pass the Senate, and through a committee in the House, or vice versa. If they have not gone through that process, then they most likely, though, will not be eligible for further debate later in the session.
Well, this week on the House floor, we ran the educational appropriations budget through on Thursday, and it passed on a bipartisan vote. And it's been a long process getting that. I started back in December with people to tell me their needs, what they need, and how much money they need for their different groups. And I'll just highlight a couple of them. The All Iowa Opportunity Scholarship will add 35 more kids to be able to receive a scholarship. A primary care loan repayment will help put more rural doctors in rural Iowa. The Future Ready Iowa Last Dollar Scholarship is just what it says. It's a scholarship, and you can accept it through various programs, and it'll help the community colleges. And then we go down in Early Childhood Iowa. We added $1 million to their budget. IJAG, another $1 million. Those are 2 good programs that hadn't been funded for a while, and there was a bipartisan need. I met with Representative Winkler, and she said that she would like to see some increases in them areas. She gave me a couple other areas to look at, and I went, went back to the House Republicans, and many of them expressed the same need for these 2 programs, that is Early Childhood Iowa and IJAG. And then it brings me on down to an area that I'm very proud to have been able to help this year is the community colleges. And we offered up $7 million to them. They had asked, I believe, 10 million, but 7 million I have found is they're very appreciative of the 7 million. And with the other scholarships that are available now, hopefully they will even be receiving more students and more aid than they had in the past or for the last several years. The Regents, we bundled them right at $16 million. And there's other stuff. Another program that we helped out and was much needed was the AEAs are going to receive $3 million to help on the Children's Mental Health Program, and they're ready to go. If they can get the $3 million passed this year, that they're ready to go out, starting to help with teachers training and create a website or a clearinghouse to show that the needs, the resources, what they have available for schools and teachers to get. So I think it's a good budget. It's headed for the Senate now, so you need to lobby the 2 senators that are here today to pass the House budget. And I know they're community college supporters.
Thanks, Dave. Good morning, everyone. It's great to see people out on a Saturday morning. I think spring has arrived. At least we've turned the corner on winter. So it's good, and like I said, I appreciate all of you taking time to come in on the Saturday morning. A couple things we've worked on in the Senate. We passed the pharmacist-assisted birth control pills that could be dispensed on a standing order by a pharmacist to those women and young ladies who feel the need or they're ready to make that step. I think this was really a positive step to improve access. I hope you all realize that for the last 20 years, since 1999, all the graduates from Drake University, which I have a little preference to, and the University of Iowa, graduate with a doctorate in pharmacy. 6 years of intense training on pharmaceutical management and the proper medications for everyone. So this is just I think it's a logical extension. It improves access, and I think it'll be a positive step. You know, there's a 21-step process before the pharmacist can dispense medications, birth control pills. A 21-step process that the pharmacist will go over with that patient. Another thing I want you to be aware of is in the state of Iowa today, 65% of the registered pharmacists are women. You know, when I graduated from pharmacy school, about 20% were women. So it has changed dramatically, and I think that's really a very positive step. As my daughter always tells me, Dad, we're going to run the world someday. So, and I think that'll probably happen. Another thing that's really been foremost for a lot of people is the floods that are going on in western Iowa. You know, those of us who live along the Mississippi or along the Iowa River, the Wapsipinicon, the Skunk, we all realize floods happen. I mean, there's just not a whole lot you can do to help control Mother Nature. So once the waters recede, there's not a whole lot that can be done until these waters go down out in western Iowa, but it's devastating for communities. I remember when Columbus Junction was underwater, Oakville, Burlington. You know, we've all experienced those devastating floods. So I'm sure the federal government and the state of Iowa will be ready to help those citizens get back on their feet as soon as possible. You know, this year's probably lost as far as getting a crop in the ground out in western Iowa, parts of it. But we will continue. We are a compassionate state. We care for our neighbors and those who have been devastated by natural disasters. And we'll continue. We'll get back on our feet.
Thanks, Tom. I'm Senator Zach Walls. I live in Coralville. I represent Wilton here in Muscatine County, all of Cedar County, and then a good chunk of Johnson County. I'm sorry that I wasn't here last month. I had a pancake breakfast, 5 listening post events, a spaghetti dinner, and a farm tour that Saturday, so I unfortunately was not able to make it to this forum, but I'm really glad to be back today. I actually want to start with a piece of news that is not state, but federal, and I just want to make sure everybody in the room knows that wind turbines do not cause cancer. it's fake news, and it's not true. I was really glad to see Senator Grassley set the record straight on that point. Wind turbines are not going to be giving anybody cancer from the noise that they make. We've heard a good update in terms of some of the things that are happening in the legislature. We just finished our 12th week. Second funnel is behind us. A few of the bills that I'm watching pretty closely, have been trying to work on, that I know are still moving forward. Senator Green just mentioned expanding access to birth control for women, which I'm excited about. Another big issue that I hear from a lot of folks about is our animal welfare laws. Iowa's currently kind of near the bottom of the barrel when it comes to protecting our companion animals, so dogs, cats, and there are bills moving forward in both the House and the Senate to make sure that we actually strengthen our laws to protect animals from abuse, torture, neglect. And that's something that historically has been a little bit of a challenge because Iowa is an ag state. We're trying to make sure that we don't harm livestock producers. But I think that we found a good compromise that gets everybody on the same page and that people feel really positive about. So I'm excited to see that moving forward. We've also got some real progress happening when it comes to industrial hemp production. This is something that I think is going to be really good for farm incomes. It's going to be good for soil. It's going to be good for water quality. And so this is something that has bipartisan support in both the House and the Senate. I believe it's currently in the House Ways and Means Committee, but I think it's moving forward over there. So our hope is that we'll be able to get this moved forward soon. And then once we have our state law in place for industrial hemp, it'll go up to the federal level, and then the Department of Ag will sign off on our plan. It'll come back down to the state level, and we may even be able to get a crop in the ground as early as this fall. So we're going to keep our fingers crossed on that one. And then I'd say that probably the final bill that I'm watching and have a little bit of apprehension about at this point, just because it hasn't gotten through yet, and I think it really should have, is extending our SAVE penny. For those of you who work in education, you might know the SAVE sales tax. That one penny is a really critical part of how we fund infrastructure projects for our schools, public education here in the state of Iowa. I'm on the Education Committee in the Senate, and we passed a SAVE extension back, I think, the second or maybe the third week of the session, and unfortunately, it's kind of just gotten battered around. I think it may be back in the Senate now in our Ways and Means Committee. I think we might be taking up the House version that you all passed. And it's funny, they sit on the other end of the table, and sometimes it feels like we're in a whole different world, but the forums here are a great way to make sure that we're all staying in touch on things. But I really want to make sure that we get the SAVE extension through. I know we didn't get that done last year because there were some fights over some other kind of non-SAVE related things. And so my hope is, I know Democrats at least are ready to vote for extending SAVE because we understand how important that is for our public schools. So there are a few other bills that are hopefully dead. Representative Carlson made a good point. Nothing's really necessarily dead until we gavel out and go home in early May, but there are a couple bills that I worked on that I'm happy to see have not been moving forward. One of them would have ended tenure at our state universities and community colleges, and the folks who I spoke with in higher education told us that would have essentially made it a lot harder to recruit professors to come to our state. We would have been the only state in America that didn't have tenure, which is a really important part of protecting academic freedom, research freedom in our higher education system. So thankfully that's not going anywhere. There was another bill that was moving forward, the Education Committee that I worked on, that would have ended a series of health screenings at the K-12 level, especially tests for vision, for dental, and for blood lead level testing. Now, blood lead level might sound like a problem from a long time ago, but as late as 2017, just a few years ago, some researchers found 1 in 5 Iowa children is born with an unsafe level of blood lead. And so it's something that we have to be really aware of, and if you don't get that treated, not aware of it, it can lead to some really big impacts. And so I was really glad to see that we are going to be protecting that in the state of Iowa. So I'll end it there, and looking forward to the conversation today and hearing what your concerns are as we move into the home stretch of the legislative session.
Thank you. So our next segment is question and answer, round one. And let me just remind those that are asking questions that you get 1 minute to ask your question. So if you'd like to begin.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I was wondering if all of you would support the amendment to House File 697 to turn around Medicaid services back to the state now that United Healthcare is pulling out of Iowa's private Medicaid management program.
Yes.
Yes.
No. But what I'm working on is for when they pull out to make sure that the caseworkers are rehired and still assigned to the people that they should be. I believe that's vital to carry on. So that's where I'm trying to get things done, Don.
No.
Thank you.
House Study Bill 165 it's forcing the city and the county governments to pay IPERS and 411 pension payments out of their general fund rather than a trust and agency property tax levy. The bill caps revenue growth into general funds by 2%. Pension contributions and health insurance premiums are outside the control of cities and counties and grow faster than 2%. This pits essential services against each other, and this is counter to the claims or assertions that there should be local control. In the past, on more than one occasion, we've brought the issue up, and there have been statements that there were no plans to change IPERS. And my question is, will you vote no on this bill should it come forward?
Well, I've got the mic, so I'll start. So that bill, a lot of the information that you're stating, I would say is inaccurate based on my reading of the bill. So most of you remember math, a factor times a factor equals a product. And a lot of the issues about tax growth in the state of Iowa, in fact, there's a lot of articles most recently about property valuations and how they have gone up. And to determine your total property tax, it's the property valuation times the levy rate. And many times cities and counties are saying, well, we're not increasing your taxes, we're not increasing the levy rate, but yet people are getting much higher tax bills because the valuation has gone up. So if you're really not going to have an increase in taxes if the valuations go up, and generally most people want valuations to go up, they want their property to appreciate, then the levy rate should be reduced if you're going to still have zero level of taxes. What this bill does is says, okay, if that is 2% or less, fine. If it's greater than 2%, then the city council or the county supervisors are going to have to take a vote to say that, yes, we are increasing the taxes. And they're allowed to do that. There's no limit on what that number can go up. That's one of the kind of misstatements about the bill. But there is a chance for taxpayers to say, hey, we don't want our taxes to go up that high, and they can file for a reverse referendum to have that vote. So it's really putting a lot more into the hands of local constituents to determine how much they want their taxes to go up. But there is no cap, and if the voters approve that, so if the voters want that investment in whatever a major initiative might be in that city or that county, they don't have to have the reverse referendum, and they can increase the taxes, or if they had the reverse referendum, they certainly can support that so that limit is there. But it's not just on autopilot that the taxes are also going up. The issue about IPERS, IPERS is a mandatory payment. So the state identifies what that IPERS contribution level needs to be. And it is based on what are the wage increases, that's part of the formula. But the cities or the counties who pay into IPERS or into 411 if they happen to have a police or fire in that, that is not part of an optional thing where they can reduce the payments. Those are mandatory payments. So the rhetoric that is kind of floated out there that this is a way to reduce IPERS or 411 or any type of payment it's not in the bill. It's not, those are mandatory payments. And the cities and counties will still have to make those payments.
I believe Gary described the bill. Did I turn it off? There we go. Sorry about that. Gary described the bill accurately, and I revisited it this week, a little about what's going on with it, and I did not see anything mentioned in it about IPERS change or anything in that either. So I think it's really a non-issue going forward.
You know, the IPERS controversy or considerations comes up all the time, but I think all of us we realize the value of having good employees and having them know where their retirement funds are at. I think this is just an example of how the media spins things way out of context. I think we've all stated that we realize the value of the program. We realize that your retirement program is your retirement program. The only thing that I would even consider changing would be to allow new members the option to join the traditional IPERS or go into a defined benefit plan. I mean, I just think the employee should have that choice. But it's the legislature's responsibility to review the program and move forward. You know, Iowa has a pretty solid program. So I really think this is just a prime example of the media spinning things to create controversy, to sell newspapers. That's the way I look at it. I will not, like I said, vote on anything that is detrimental to your retirement program.
Thank you.
I'm really glad you're here, and I think that you've got the right to be concerned and to be trying to hold our feet to the fire. The concern that I have is I think that Representative Carlson is right. There's nothing in this bill specifically that is going to go after IPERS, make changes to 411. The concern that I think you should be thinking about is if you continue to eat away, right, at growth in revenue, is that going to force communities to make a tough choice when they're making their budgets, right? And I certainly understand. I do think it's important for citizens to have input to their cities, to their counties. What should property tax rate? You know, we're probably all starting to get our assessments right in the mail. Assessments are going up, right? People's tax bills are going up. And if you think that things are going too high, you can vote for folks who are running for a county board of supervisor, running for city council, running for school board, right? There are a lot of different places where those decisions get made. And so I haven't had a chance to review this bill closely. And so I don't want to get too far into the weeds on a bill that I have not yet read. But I think it's really important for folks who are concerned about IPERS, concerned about 411, keep coming, keep holding our feet to the fire. Don't let anybody intimidate you into not showing up, and clearly that's not going to work for you. And I would hope that that's true for other people as well. This is not something that's ever just going to be done. This is something that we are going to have to continue to fight for, and so I'm really glad you're here and asking these questions.
Thank you.
My name is Shelley Servidillo, and I'm going to respectfully request accommodations. I have a support person. Laura's just going to kind of hover. I am a director and founder of the Iowa Hemp Industries Association. It is a C6 trade association. I'm here to point out that we have two bills going back and forth that intersect. One has to do with MedFarm, and one has to do with our Iowa hemp bill. And we have had a cap removed and then replaced in the Judiciary Committee that put the 3% cap back. I'd like to point out that all you have to do to make something work in formulary, you're a pharmacist, Senator Green, you know this, is you just put your decimal point, percentage to decimal. It's just math. I'm a nurse. I'm talking to you, nurse to pharmacist here. We get this. We don't need law. We don't need to advertise sweeping change. So that was a fallacy. Also, the 40-acre cap on the hemp and the interstate commerce, also a fallacy. Farmers don't need this. We need to establish infrastructure in the state for our farmers. Thank you.
So I'm not up to speed on the cannabidiol program, so I'll let, I know, it's hard, it's like origin. Cannabidiol program, so I'll let Senator Green speak to that one. I can talk to you about the 40-acre limitation on hemp. That's something that in fact, I was one of the people who asked for that to be put into the bill because we want to make sure that we don't have a couple of out-of-state processors come into the state and contract with just a handful of very, very large farms and leave out smaller producers who might not be able to grow 4,000 or 5,000 acres at a time. And so we want to make sure for the first several years, we want that 40-acre cap in to have an even playing field for small producers and large producers. It's our feeling that if we're going to have potentially some windfall farm income for folks who are growing this for the first time, that they are able to compete on a meaningful level with folks who are some of those large corporate producers. So we want to make sure our family farms are taken care of. So that's why that limitation is in there. And in terms of the commerce with other states, I know that's something that we've been talking with folks who are in the lobby about. We haven't, I don't think, arrived at a conclusion on that, and it's part of why it hasn't passed. But I certainly understand we want to be able to process hemp that's grown in Iowa in other states, and we want to bring hemp that's grown in other states to process in Iowa. So there has to be some way to make that happen.
Farm Bill 2018, it makes it legal, sir.
No, well, I'm well aware of that, but we need to make sure that's in our bill.
Yes, sir.
Well, I will continue to work for the advancement of medical cannabis. I think it's just a logical step. We need to move forward with this thing. The industrial hemp, again, Iowa's an ag state. We need to promote and encourage products that help our farm base. I mean, they say the potential for growing hemp for paper products, for industrial use, is very widespread, and it's just an option that should be allowable. The industrial hemp side has very low content of THC, the hallucinogenic side of the hemp or of the cannabis product. So it's not a, people who say that the farmers are just going to be out there getting high. Well, that's just total fallacy. So it's just an option that we need to allow our farmers, our agricultural community to utilize, and if they choose to do it, it's going to require some specialized equipment, but it's just something that needs to move forward, and I will continue to be an advocate for both the medical cannabis and the industrial hemp.
As a farmer, I see this as a good possibility for farmers. I like having 40 acres or whatever, somewhere around that would be great. It's labor intensive, and the way I see this and what I've heard talked about with other representatives is I think we'll be another year away before we do anything here in the state, just because of getting the final draft out and seeing what it looks like, getting it to the federal government and make sure it fits everything that they require. And I'm excited about where the future could be with this product, and looking forward to seeing just where it goes here in Iowa and how big a market it actually is. So that's my opinion on in the industrial hemp.
I have farmers from other states that know the difference between planting between CBD and ag hemp, and how you have to plant it, and what the numbers are, what the buy-in is, how you have to do it, what the harvest numbers look like, and how that all works. And I would be so happy to bring that education to you, because we shouldn't be looking at just CBD. We should be looking at growing our ag and industry, so that our farmers can benefit from this, because I think all the hoo-ha is about CBD, 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 and we need to be cultivating the health, wealth, and prosperity of our farmers, and that's what the goal should be, and that's where I'm coming from. Thank you so much.
So I agree with Senator Walz that the issue of the 40 acres was well discussed, and the ability to allow lots of people to be able to have the opportunity to get into that. I think that's good public policy. One of the issues when I talk to the ag community is about the seeds that are available to plant the industrial hemp, to make sure that the THC does not exceed the cap. Because if they planted it and they're growing it and it exceeds the cap, then Iowa Department of Agriculture would then come in to destroy the crop.
I have solutions for
So
that
they
too.
have invested, and then they may have a crop that could get destroyed. So Kentucky seems to be the furthest along in the development of the seeds, but there is still that work to make sure that as it goes forward, that farmers can plant a crop where they have confidence that it is going to be a crop that's going to meet that criteria.
Our farmers have landrace strains that can go to our land-grant universities for research.
Shelley, I think Sue's trying to get your attention.
Yes. I appreciate that. Let our farmers grow their strains and research them, and because our strains have adapted to our climates and soils. Thank you. Thank you.
Morning. On the community college funding and what the numbers are and where the bills sit.
So I'm going to let Dave talk more about it, but just as an overview for so there are 10 budgets, department budgets, that are done by the legislature. And every year, the House starts 5 of those budgets, and the Senate starts 5 of those budgets, and then we pass them across. During the course of the year, members from the House and members from the Senate oftentimes have joint meetings and listen to hearings and listen to the department presentations and that. So this year, education was started with Representative Kerr. And so I'll let him talk more about the details, but we had some significant work done in community college. We listened very closely to that, plus the scholarship dollars that are available in Future Ready Iowa, which are really aimed at 2-year degrees or certification programs, will be very meaningful for the community colleges. So my sense is, in discussions with a lot of community college executives, is that we've made significant progress. And so I'll put my plug in too, that the Senate should adopt the House bill on education in regard to community colleges.
Well, thank you for the question. I'm sure that all of us up here and Representative Kaufman all support the community colleges. I'm a graduate. I know, man, I've said it before here at Muscatine, and I believe it was a junior college when I graduated a few days ago. But anyhow, this is my first year on a budget committee, and it's been very interesting. As I said, I started in December, started talking to people. The community colleges were one of those that I talked to in early January, and they expressed an interest in their funding, and they kept talking to me about it, and we was able to come up with $7 million, and I'm getting a huge bunch of support, lots of support from around the state that this $7 million is adequate. It'll do what they want to do. It'll help bring them back to where they've struggled in the past couple years with it. So that's a product of a good economy here in the state of Iowa to be able to do this. That's the way I look at it. The $7 million, I believe, was an adequate number for this year. With the scholarships that are available, I think that will help benefit the community colleges. The last dollar scholarship is just huge for the community colleges. And also, let me just point out, maybe not really related to the community college, but I don't know how many are familiar with IJAG here. I believe they're here in Muscatine. And getting those kids a high school degree, and they graduate over 90% of the kids that enter the IJAG program, gives them an opportunity to get a community college degree or go on to a 4-year degree that maybe they wouldn't have had. So that all ties in. This whole budget, if you really look at it, is economic development. If you really get down to it, from early childhood Iowa, helps parents with kids. The kids get learning, they get started on the right direction, and it just works its way on up through the community college. So I'm excited about the budget we put together, and like I said on the House floor, I believe it is a good budget, and I'd like to see it pass through the Senate wholly. I know it probably won't happen. We're going to have some negotiations, but I'm going to stick to it for $7 million to get to the community colleges. Thank you.
Whenever there's a community college issue, I communicate with Naomi and with Dr. Michael Ash down at Southeastern Community College in West Burlington. You know, I think education is obviously a priority for all of us. I don't think there's any debate on that, and it's obviously the biggest part of our state budget. $7.4 billion budget between K through 12, pre-K, community colleges, the regions. Education gets almost 56% of our entire state budget. So it's a huge amount of money. But I am fully aware and I fully support giving as much as possible. You know, we've got the governor's budget, you got the House budget, and you got the Senate's budget. You know, I think it varies between 7 out of the House. I think the preliminary numbers of the first number coming out of the Senate is like a little over 5 million. The governor's got a little different number, so it's a melting process. You know, If you give a full 7, then in the Senate side, well, then we got to reduce one other fund appropriate amount. So it is a balancing act. It's a melting of all these ideas and priorities. But believe me, we're going to give as much as possible as we can to the community colleges. There's no doubt the benefit to the community of Muscatine and Clinton and Davenport for Eastern Iowa Community College, and in Southeastern Iowa, we got Southeastern Community College. We have campuses in Keokuk, Mount Pleasant, and Burlington. So we will give as much as we can. It's much easier this year than it has been the previous 2 years. The state's economy is in a much better shape. So we all realize the value of our community colleges. Sure, David, don't shut it off.
No, I hope I don't shut it off. But what I wanted to point out, the $7 million is an additional onto what their appropriation already is. So it's just not a $7 million budget that they're splitting up. I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that.
Thanks for the question, Chloe. I had a great time visiting with folks when you came out to visit in March. I think one of the things that I'm starting to learn, freshman legislator, just finished my 12th week on the job, because Republicans currently have full control of the legislature, they don't really talk to us a whole lot. I know Representative Kerr consulted Democrats on his side in the House. I have not been approached by my Senate kind of equivalent over on our side, Senator Kreinbrink, who's the chair on the Senate side. So he's not really kind of given me a lot of information. But basically the negotiations at this point are between the Republicans in the Senate and the Republicans in the House. That's where the real negotiating is happening. And the governor, I don't think, has really taken a hands-on approach. Some governors like to get really involved in setting these budget numbers and bringing people together to kind of hammer things out, and I don't think Governor Reynolds has taken that approach at this point. Yeah, and she's also got a lot going on with the floods and all that, so I can understand where she is. I certainly would support the Senate adopting the House number. I'm on the record. I did not support the big round of tax cuts that we saw last year that took a kind of a real scalpel to the budget this year and are going to mean that we got less money to appropriate. But given the revenue that we do have, I think that the House budget is probably going to be a little bit more friendly for our community colleges and also our Board of Regents schools and all that as well than what we're going to see coming out of the Senate. So at this point, what you'll want to watch is you'll look at the House number, look at the Senate number. When that comes out, then there'll be some negotiation at that point. My hope is we see the Senate budget this week. If not, well, unfortunately, it's your guess is almost as good as ours at this point, probably. So, but thanks for the question.
Thank you, guys.
Hello, my name is Sarah Landy. Thank you all for your good work. And I'm here to encourage all of you to vote against Senate File 548. This is the land bill that says that conservation groups should not be able to use the state revolving loan fund for water mitigation and water quality projects. They have done this over the years, conservation groups, and it has helped get land in public areas, and certainly now we know we have water quality problems too. So I understand there are just two entities for it, Farm Bureau and the Cattlemen, and all the conservation groups say, come on, give us a chance to have clean water, good parks, and in the word of somebody who was just here, if the farmers think that this is going to cut out young farmers from buying this land, if they try to farm this land, they're going to go broke. Now, Kurt Weiss, I wouldn't know who said that, but this is land that isn't good farmland, and it's for results for the people.
So, Sarah, thank you for bringing this up. The Senate has already voted on this. I voted no. I'm not totally sure where it is in the House. We'll let the representatives speak to that. The Democrats, are very sympathetic to the point that producers are raising. Nobody wants to be bidding against somebody who can get a loan at 0 to 2%, right? That's hard. So we actually proposed a series of exemptions for if you're bidding against Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation, but you're wanting to put the land into hunting or some specific kinds of like flood mitigation projects. We put forward a series of exemptions. All of those were voted down, unfortunately. And so I think this really does come down to a difference of philosophy and kind of worldview, and there are probably some disagreements at this table about that. I think especially with what we see what's happening right now in western Iowa, right? There are a lot of folks who are being really, really affected by floods. And the news that I want to make sure everybody here knows, the flooding is going to get worse. The Trump administration last year released their every 4 years, the federal government puts out a report on kind of where things are as the globe changes. And the Trump administration, so you don't have to take my word for it, the Trump administration says the Cedar River Valley Basin, right, what was a 100-year flood in the 20th century is going to become a 25-year flood in the 21st century. This is not like a far-off thing. This is happening now. And so we have to start getting ready. We got to be able to adapt, to mitigate, and I think that this is an important part of that mitigation adaptation approach. And so unfortunately, I want to hear where it is in the House. I think that we're moving in the wrong direction with this bill, so that's why I voted no.
I just thought this conversation might come up today, so I did bring along, and I'd like to show you this to you afterwards. This is the appropriations proposals. This is actually Senate Study Bill 1251, and there are some staggering numbers here. $44 million for the purpose of advancement of hunting, fishing, trapping, protection, wildlife restoration. I mean, I could go on and on here, but there's some big numbers. I think one other issue that we need to really address, we all love our parks, our trails, the conservation. We're very fortunate to live here in the Midwest. The farm ground here is as fertile as you're going to find almost anywhere in the world. You travel out west and you got sand and rock. You look at around some of the other parts of the world, they are so envious of the crop production that we have here in the Midwest. And we obviously have to take care of that ground and that water and that soil. Senator Walz talked about the flooding that goes on. Part of that problem is due to the increased spread of residential property and development ground out on what ground used to absorb water is now concrete and asphalt, and that water's running off. I mean, so we've got to be very proactive about, positive measures, grass strips along the edges of fields to retain that water so that the soil doesn't run into the streams, creeks, rivers. We can dredge the Mississippi, we can dredge the Missouri, but you can't really dredge the Cedar or the Iowa River. So, we've got to be proactive and think of alternative ways to mitigate some of that runoff, be as conservative as possible on these issues. So it's just something that like I said, we've got to take care of. This ground is not a finite measure. It's going to flow down the rivers, so we got to take care of it.
Well, let me just say that when it comes to conservation, I believe myself and my family are very conservative on the conservation end of it. We have a farm, it's in CRP. We do whatever we can. We plant food plots for the deer and the pheasants, and every animal wants to visit and have some corn or soybeans there in the wintertime. And I see this bill as very narrowly focused on pitting a farmer against an entity that can have access to 2% loan and can force land out, be bought by the Heritage Foundation, where a young farmer or any farmer could still be able to buy it, but are being outbidded in several cases. And I think it's just narrowly limited to whether you can borrow money at a cheaper rate than what a young farmer or anybody does. I supported it come out of committee, and I don't think it has to go to Ways and Means. I think it could go straight to the floor for a vote, and I look forward to that vote.
I haven't seen Senate File 548 yet, Sarah, but I remember last session we had here was right on the cusp of the first bill that got dropped in the House and Senate, and it was kind of a surprise to all of us, and many of the issues that were raised, we got killed, and I think in this case, I think we'll stay dead. the issue seems to be narrow from what I've heard and what I've heard comments by the other legislators down to this issue of what is the cost of money, and does a nonprofit group have an advantage to a lower cost of money than somebody who is a private individual. Some of this land, I'm being told, is also being purchased not for crop, but for cattle grazing and those types of things where people are trying to get a hold of that land. So we'll see when that bill comes forward, but I think first of all, from where we were a month ago when we were at this session, this is much, much narrower focused as to where it is. Part of the issues on the flooding, and we've talked about the cedar, they're also not man-made just from the expansion, but if you look at some of the flood protection that's gone into Cedar Rapids, for instance, much protection there for their downtown and a lot of their residential areas, but by those walls going up, the speed of the water coming down from the cedar is much faster than it used to be. I've been talking to our emergency management guy. He said the water that used to take 36 hours to get from Cedar Rapids to Conesville is now 18 hours. So that whole velocity issue has really been impacted by other protection issues as well. So it's a combination of looking at all those items.
Morning, my name's Kerry Keller, and I know the solar project has already passed the Senate, so I'm sort of directing this to Dave and Gary, and I guess I'd like to ask you to vote against the current solar project as it's in the House right now, and at least push it back for a little bit more study. I mean, I think this legislation is good for one person or one group of people, and that is the large utilities. And that's evident by the thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars being spent on advertising right now on this topic. And there is no other advertising on any other topics going on in the state of Iowa right now. So this is being brought to us by the large government or the large utilities. The other thing I'd like to say is just a little bit ago we heard about a 40-acre limit on hemp. You know, we have large-scale utilities being proposed right now within 15 miles of our area. We've got 1,000 acres in West Liberty, 2,500 acres down in Louisa County, 800 acres in Wapello. So this is evident that they want solar, but they're trying to limit the residents and the farmers from getting it themselves.
Okay, so since our last session, the Senate has passed the grid equity bill, and it's over for the House consideration. Kerry, we're not going to be in agreement on this issue because I would support the bill. But let's get back to what the fundamental issue is on that bill, that under current state law, people who have solar installations, they may use solar, right, so their own consumption. At the time when they aren't generating enough electricity, they use electricity from whoever their provider is, REC, municipals, Alliant, or Mid-American, or whatever. And when they are generating more than they can consume, they are selling it to those. And by federal law, all utilities have to always be ready to serve the minute that somebody needs electricity, or they have to buy for excess generation. So the market is established. So people know if they make that kind of investment into any kind of renewable fuel that they can always sell it and they can always have backup power. That backup power or that ability to sell does come with a cost for the utility companies, which is then passed on to all the ratepayers. And those things such as the cost of distribution and the cost of transmission lines. But in the current net metering situation that we have in Iowa, those customers are not contributing to the cost of the transmission and distribution lines. They're paying for their hookup charge, they're paying for the metering, they're paying for administration, they're paying for their line, but they're not paying for this. So what this bill is trying to do is establish that for those people who use renewable sources for generation, that they contribute for that cost of the distribution and transmission line. There's different options that they can choose as to how that they might pay for that. Because if they don't pay for that, then those costs, as solar continues to grow, and I think solar will continue to grow, the technology is getting much, much better, just like the technology has changed dramatically on wind, that those costs are going to get passed on to the people who do not have some type of renewable source, because the cost is still going to be the same. It's not like it doesn't increase the profitability for the utility companies, because utility company rates are determined by the Iowa Utilities Board, and they have it's kind of how we work with monopolies. They show their rates, what is their expected profitability and anticipated profitability, and IUB regulates what that profitability is. So if those costs are being transferred to somebody else, it will change in the rates. It won't change the profitability of the utility companies. It's going to transfer the rates. And one of the principles on utilities over the years has always been that ratepayers in one class don't transfer costs to ratepayers in that same class. And what this is trying to do is establish that that's a level playing field. That's really the crux of the bill. It doesn't go any broader than that. It is clearly to establish the right policy that we have the right policy in Iowa. And many, many other states have either already done this or are undertaking similar steps.
I believe the RECs, and you know you deal with these in your business, that the RECs and munis already have a charge. And I don't believe it's hurt solar a bit. in rural Iowa, since I see a lot of solar going up in rural Iowa. For me, right now, I am really not convinced that this is what I want to vote for, but they're getting closer. They've answered a number of my questions, and like one of the questions was, in the bill it says grandfathered in. I asked, what is grandfathered in? Does that mean a person that's going to put up a solar structure, has to be completed by July 1st, or does it mean purchased by July 1st with the intent to complete it by a certain date? And they added, I believe, 180 days to that, so it's an extended period of time. And how controversial this issue is, I have been asked a question that goes along these lines that says, if a residential person or a farmer uses the wind or solar and they generate back into the system, does that mean that they should be, their land or whatever should be rezoned from commercial or from residential farm to commercial, because now they are a generator of electricity? And I have not had a lot of answers on that because I haven't asked that question yet, and I really think that's a local zoning decision. But see, that's just type of the questions that we have on this issue. So I'm understanding the bill. No, I've got my budget behind me. I'll put a little more effort researching this. But yeah, I see a fairness issue in this, and I do see it that way too. But we'll just have to see where this bill goes, and I can find out a little more information.
You know, I think we all, as tax day approaches, we all just love to write that check to the federal government or to the state government. You know, we just love to pay taxes. Not really. But as long as it's a matter of fairness and equitable, you know, that's a key point here. You know, I think solar obviously is the way of the future. I really do. How is the International Space Station, how do they get their power? Well, they got a big solar array hooked on, I think there's 6 or maybe even 8 big wings that they have, and that powers that entire space station. So it is a matter of how you can best utilize and accumulate that power that's needed. I was really upset. I'm sure most of you have Alliant over here, don't you? In eastern Iowa, I think Alliant is the big carrier. You know, when we all got those notices, what was it, an average of 8% electrical and 18% electrical increase and 35%, up to 35% for gas? I mean, where do the seniors go with that? When they get hit with a rate increase like that, what do? They turn their thermostat down. They're cold in the winter. They eat 2 meals rather than 3. I mean, the average senior on fixed income can't afford a 35% increase to keep their house warm in the winter. We just had one of the toughest winters we've had in quite a while. So let's be fair and equitable about this. Let's have a realistic approach as to how we can best provide those necessary services. I'm going to wrap up with one quick point here. I had an electrical issue at my house, and I did call Alliant, and they had a serviceman at my house within 45 minutes. So, I mean, we've all got to pay for those services. They all provide a service that we all need. We don't have the expertise to do that. But those who have a solar array on their barn or their farm or their house, they've got a significant investment, and they should be credited for their conservation issues and also for lowering their overall utility costs.
Gary, thank you for asking the question. Can I? What do you own solar panels? Why are you following this, sir?
I'm a solar installer, and we also have solar on our office.
Solar installer. Okay. And are you here in the Muscatine area? How many folks do you employ?
We've got about
Probably varies. 20. So look, the consumer solar market, and that's primarily what you serve, right? Consumer, like household, maybe some farms. has done a lot of really good things for the Iowa economy, and that has come in part because we've made investments. The government, right, has subsidized this market with tax credits, with research for many years, decades even. And I really appreciate how much Representative Carlson knows about the subject. He brings a lot of technical expertise. Did you write the bill in the House? Or you worked with LSA?
It's a
Commerce Committee bill. Yeah. So, look, so he knows what he's talking about, right, and all this stuff. But what it fundamentally comes down to is, as a state and as a country, what are we subsidizing, right? For example, the state of Iowa gave Apple $208 million of your taxpayer money to build a data center outside of Des Moines that's going to make like 40 jobs. That's wild, right? Or, when we subsidize, and fundamentally, right, that's what this is. It's a subsidy from taxpayers or ratepayers, right, to people who have solar on their household, on their farm. And look, I understand equity issues, fairness. We all got to pay our fair share. That's how taxes work. But then as a state, we make a decision about how we spend those tax dollars or those ratepayer dollars, right? And fundamentally, I think it's really important that we choose to invest those taxpayer dollars onto renewable sources of energy that are good for jobs, that are good for the environment, that mean that we are burning less coal, less natural gas. Because when you burn coal, you are putting pollution into the air, and it's not just carbon and climate change. We're talking about particulate matter. We're talking about coal ash. We're talking about releasing pollution that leads to heart disease, lung disease, asthma, cancer. There's the research on this is so crystal clear that when we are able to invest in solar, invest in wind, it's good for the economy. It's good for Iowa jobs. And so as a state, I think fundamentally the solar bill, there are questions about grid equity and all of that. And look, I don't want to skip over that. But the bigger question is, as a state and as a country, what are we investing in? And I would agree with Senator Green. We should be investing in the future. That means more subsidies, more investment in solar and in wind, geothermal, and moving away from fossil fuels that create a lot of real health problems and environmental problems. So thank you for asking the question.
Morning. I'm Steve Leahy from Nichols, and I'm a solar consumer. I'd like to follow up on a couple of points. This ad that's running on TV is
Oh boy.
half false. Right. This ad on TV's got a lot of holes in it. When I made my installation, I spent tens of thousands of dollars. All the REC did was come in, pull out the one-way meter, and put in the net meter. Those things are less than $100 a pop. No new lines were put in, no new transformers were needed, so I'm not getting by free. And as far as the payment to me, during peak hours, 4 p.m. to 9 p.m., that's kind of past the peak for sun. I do get full credit for anything generated. And in the off-peak hours, I only get 3 cents when the charges are 12. So Mid-American made over $600 million last year. They're not going broke. And my question is, when will you folks start standing up for the farmers, the business, and residence owners instead of catering to the monopolies and the billionaire?
And would you say your name was, sir?
Steve.
Steve. Steve. Has anybody else gotten the mailers? Like these like big jumbo postcards saying, like a guy with a sports car saying you wouldn't pay for your neighbor's sports car, so don't pay for your neighbor's solar. Anybody else get those mailers? Am I the a couple show of hands? And you're seeing the ads on TV probably. It's like they were on all the March Madness games in Iowa, right? Also, you might have gotten a phone call. Anybody get a phone call asking? Yeah, you got a phone call asking you to call your senator or representative to vote for this bill. You might have seen some ads on Facebook or Instagram, right? You have some Facebook, Instagram ads. Now, if you notice, if you look closely, those are all paid for by the REAL Coalition, capital R-E-A-L. It's an acronym that stands for Renewable Energy Advancing Leadership, some like hocus pocus BS. It's a dark money group, which is ironic because it's a solar bill, right? It's a shady solar group. I mean, I think that's kind of funny in a really dark, sad way. And so, like, I've got my constituents are getting phone calls from these people in call centers saying, "Well, hey, this is so and so from the Real Coalition. Will you please call Senator Walz and tell him to vote for this bill?" Thankfully, most of my constituents have gotten that phone call and instead called me and say, "Hey, I'm getting these weird phone calls asking me to tell you to vote for this thing. What's in the bill? Like, why would I do that?" So we don't know where the money's coming from, but I think it's probably pretty likely that it's coming from the $600 million in profits that we saw from these major utilities. Look, if the legislation was like good, you wouldn't need a multi-million-dollar advertising blitz to try and convince people it was good. I think it would just be good on its own merits. And so, look, I appreciate the need for grid equity. I appreciate the need, if you want to make investments in utility scale solar, and it sounds like that's already happening, we should do that. It's like we need investments in utility scale solar, just like we need investments in consumer solar. But I don't have any assurances, or I don't see anything in the bill that says that's what's going to happen. And I think that's why we're all seeing all these ads on TV trying to convince us that's what's going to happen. But maybe there's something I'm missing here, so we'll pass the mic down.
I think I saw a survey where they said the top 8 executives at Alliant Energy all made over $1 million in salaries. Okay, yeah. Spread some of that around. They don't need the 35% increase. So I'm sympathetic for that, and I understand those issues. One thing I do want to bring up with my friend Zach Walz here. I have the Iowa fertilizer plant down between Burlington and Fort Madison. The state of Iowa put forth $105 million of incentives to get them to develop that plant there. They spent $3 billion to develop that plant. They employ 230 people with an annual payroll of over $25 million. Now, for that $105 million of tax incentives and tax credits that they got from the state of Iowa, that was not a check that the state of Iowa wrote the Iowa fertilizer plant. Those were credits towards future earnings. They have not made a penny yet. They've got a long way to go to pay off that $3 billion of investment that they've got there, besides the products that they're producing for Iowa farmers. It's going to be a boom to have some of that product developed right here in southeast Iowa. So I think when we talk about tax credits and that, we got to remember how that really works. Over 200 jobs in Iowa right now, over $25 million in salaries that they're paying out to those 200 employees, over 200 employees. So it is a double-edged sword. It really is. Are we going to give away some of these tax credits to get that employment, get that investment here in our state? Yeah, I think that's what we got to do, because if they didn't do it here, they'd be doing it in Minnesota or South Dakota or somewhere else. So it is a double-edged sword. So we've got to take this in the real context of what it is. But I still like this guy.
Well, to Zach's point about getting lobbied phone calls and at home, that's part of the issue of getting a vote in one way or the other. But when we get back to the bill itself, I believe we need to just look at, is it a fairness issue or is it not a fairness issue? And I think that's where all the decisions of all the representatives have got to, or need to look and, find out in their own heart whether that's the issue, or you going to vote for Mid-America? It's not, and I don't look at it as a vote for Mid-America or anybody. I look at it as a issue that is affecting my district, and I've had a lot of people, more people probably say don't, or vote for this issue than there has been not vote for this issue. So I've got a decision to make on it.
So let's go back to the bill. The RECs and the municipals are not impacted by the bill because the RECs and municipals already deal with net metering in the same way that this bill is going to lead. So it has no impact there, and if you're satisfied with how it works for the municipals, RECs, then you're in good shape. It'll put everybody on the same playing field. the issues, the 35%, I haven't seen 35%, Tom. I think when the Iowa utility boards get done with the rate increase and with the energy reduction, you're probably going to see an increase in the 3 to 4% range. So, you know, I know it's always fun to throw out numbers, but, you know, facts sometimes get in the way. When you talk about Apple and tax credits, yeah, I will say they did get a couple $100 million in tax credit, of which about $20 million was from the state of Iowa. Okay, which were tax credits against future profitability that Apple did. Apple invested in the Des Moines area $1.375 billion to build that. So where is the tax increase coming? It's coming from the property tax increase by that going to become a commercial location. And the local people in that market, their city councils, their counties, they're the ones that provide most of the tax credits against the future of that development. So while it's fun to talk about $200 million tax credits, let's remember that the state's part of that was approximately $20 million to generate that infrastructure in that area, that growth, and the other growth that's taking place around that campus area and that investment. In respect to the grid equity bill, I think putting the rate-regulated utilities, which are predominantly Mid-American and Alliant, on the same level scale that we have for how we get solar. This does not take away from the solar tax credits. Let's remember that if somebody installs solar, they get a 30% tax credit from the federal government. The state of Iowa matches the federal by 50%, so there's an additional 15%. So you got 45% tax credit to make that investment. You have a sales tax that you can get back on that. So we are still subsidizing between the federal government and the state government tremendously the investment that people may choose to make in solar. This bill doesn't attack any of those tax credit programs. What it is doing is saying as it moves forward that people who are using the infrastructure, which is predominantly the transmission and distribution lines, that they pay an equal amount to the people who are buying utilities in a normal way, where they just buy their utilities. That same cost for transmission and distribution that I may be paying because I don't have solar is what my neighbor would pay. What solar is doing is replacing the generation part of what the utility company does because they're generating. That's why it's called generation. But they still are using distribution and transmission, and we're trying to have that on a level playing field. So I think the bill is truly an equity bill.
Roger, we're out of time and we're going to take final comments. I didn't hear you.
I just want to propose that we be innovative and let people seek all solutions, and thinking that we have a senator from Burlington and one from Coralville. We're in the middle. Move to Muscatine. Hook up with Muscatine Power and Water, the most efficient producer in the state.
Thank you, Roger.
Your bill will go way down.
Okay. It's time for us to have final comments from our legislators. So Gary, if you start, you've got 2 minutes.
Okay, great. Well, thanks again very much for everybody for coming out for this session, and many of you come to the previous sessions as well. This will be the final forum that we have for this year. There is one bill that no one asked a question about that is continuing to move forward. It's a significant initiative that the governor has called Empower Rural Iowa. That is a Ways and Means bill, and I am personally managing that bill in the House of Representatives. It has 2 significant parts in it. One of it has to do with housing and to stimulate the growth of housing in rural Iowa, which is such desperately needed, and Muscatine would be considered part of that rural Iowa initiative, and increasing the amount of tax credits available to spur on developers to build housing. But in many of the other small areas that, especially that Dave and Tom have in the Columbus Junctions and Wapalos and the Wiltons and stuff, you know, that ability to continue to get housing in rural Iowa is a critically important part of that bill. And the other part of that bill is the expansion of broadband. For people to choose to live in rural Iowa or companies to operate in rural Iowa, that access to high-quality broadband is significant, and we are looking at how can we dramatically increase investment to help companies get that broadband expanded out into rural Iowa. So I expect you'll hear more about that in the coming weeks.
Just along those lines, also with the broadband and housing, that's additional $300,000 that was in the educational budget for the rural primary care loan repayment program is another addition to the Governor's Empower Rural Iowa initiative also. And I'd like to thank everybody for coming this year. Very good questions, very thought out questions, and we still have 3 to 4 weeks of session to go and 3 to 4 weeks more. So anyhow, looking forward to some of the bills that are coming by, and of course we're all ready to get out of there when the time comes. So thank you again for coming, and call your senators for their help. Thank you.
Well, you know, again, I appreciate this forum a great deal. You people are always very informed, very inquisitive, and very respectful of your community and your causes, and that's all we can ask for. So I appreciate it a great deal. You know, I want to tell you this is, we are truly, I feel, as bipartisan as we can be. You know, so Senator Walz opened up with a little political pun at our president, so I'm going to tell you, Zach told me I could put my hands on Zach, so have a great day, everyone.
I've gotten to know Tom really well. He's a good friend, and this is my first session, and it has been, I've learned so much. I've made new friends. I've learned a lot from people, even if we don't always agree on everything. It's been a real pleasure just to have such a better understanding of how policy is working at the state level. I'm starting to learn how the legislature really works. And I want to thank all of you for coming out, for asking good questions, tough questions, trying to hold us accountable. It's really important. Democracy is a full contact sport, you know, and it really requires people to be engaged and to ask these questions and to show up. So I really appreciate all of you for being here, taking time out of your beautiful Saturday morning to come out and spend time here with all of us. Anytime you have questions for me, I'm very easy to find. I'm always happy to answer emails, questions by phone. If you ever come out to the Capitol, especially in these last few weeks here, don't hesitate to say hi. I'd be happy to show you around and welcome you to the Senate. So thank you all for being here, and I really look forward to these last few weeks, getting home, hopefully getting some more work done over the interim on some of the things that we weren't able to finish this year, and then hit the ground running next year. So thank you all for making this possible and for having us here today.